Boss rolled his eyes at my idea in the meeting, then tried to pitch it as his own a week later. I've always been the person who double-checks their alarm 3 times before bed. The one who arrives 15 minutes early to meetings. The employee who submits reports 2 days before a deadline. Meticulous. Prepared. Cautious. But nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared me for what happened that Monday morning. The conference room buzzed with pre-meeting chatter as I settled into my usual spot, 3 chairs from the end, laptop open with my presentation queued. My fingers trembled slightly as I sipped my coffee, leaving a smudge of lipstick on the rim. I'd spent 72 hours bringing this idea to life. 72 hours of spreadsheets, mock-ups, and energy drinks that left my apartment looking like a disaster zone and my eyes bloodshot. "You okay, Natalie?" whispered Denise from accounting, noticing my 3rd trip to refill my water in 10 minutes. "Just nervous," I admitted, forcing a smile. "Big idea today." She squeezed my arm. "You'll crush it." If only she knew how much was riding on this. After 2 years at Meridian Logistics, I was still fighting to be taken seriously. I'd watched male colleagues with half my experience get promoted while I remained trapped in mid-level purgatory. This AI-driven logistics model could change everything, not just for the company but for me. The door swung open, and Greg Harmon strode in. Our department head moved with the confident swagger of a man who never questioned his place in a room. At 45, he commanded attention with his tailored suits and salt and pepper hair that seemed purposefully disheveled in that "I'm too important to care" way. People instinctively straightened when he entered. "Let's make this quick, people," he announced, loosening his ties slightly. "Jensen, I hear you've got something to share?" My mouth went dry. "Yes, I've been working on a new..." "Keep it under 5 minutes," he interrupted, checking his Rolex. "We've got the quarterly projections to review." I nodded, standing shakily. The room suddenly felt too warm, the faces around the oval table blurring slightly as I connected my laptop to the projector. The quarterly projections could wait. What I had would transform our entire operation. "Good morning, everyone." I began, my voice steadier than I felt. "For the past 3 months, I've been researching ways to optimize our distribution network using predictive analytics." The first slide appeared, a clean, minimalist diagram showing how AI could anticipate shipping delays before they happened. I'd spent hours making sure even the non-technical executives could understand it. As I explained the core concept, I noticed a few intrigued expressions, some subtle nods. Then I glanced at Greg. He wasn't just disinterested, his eyes were fixed on his phone under the table, thumbs scrolling rapidly. When he finally looked up at my second slide, the corner of his mouth twitched downward. "The beauty of this system," I continued, my confidence building, "is that it learns from each supply chain disruption. By analyzing historical patterns, and..." That's when it happened. Greg's eyes rolled, so dramatically his entire head moved with them. It wasn't subtle or private. It was theatrical, meant for everyone to see. A performance. "Natalie," he cut in, his voice dripping with condescension, "this is all very academic." The word dangled in the air like an insult. "I've actually built a working prototype," I countered, clicking to the next slide showing implementation metrics. The results show a potential 37% reduction in. "That's too theoretical," Greg said with a dismissive wave, not even bothering to look at the data I'd spent weeks compiling. Then came the smirk, that small, cruel twist of his lips that telegraphed to everyone that my idea wasn't just being rejected, it was being ridiculed. "Let's move on to something practical. The quarterly projections, please." A soft ripple of nervous laughter circled the room. Not genuine amusement, but the uncomfortable chuckle people produce when witnessing someone's public humiliation. I recognized Dave from marketing actually covering his mouth, eyes darting between Greg and me with a mix of pity and relief that he wasn't in my position. My presentation, my labor of love, disappeared from the screen as Greg took control of the projector. 3 nights of work. Countless simulations. The solution that could save the company millions while cutting our carbon footprint in half. Gone in 30 seconds. My legs felt wooden as I returned to my seat, face burning not with embarrassment, but with something deeper, something molten. I stared at my notebook where I'd scribbled my tagline for the project: Predictive Pathways, Seeing Tomorrow's Logistics Today. The meeting droned on around me, but I was somewhere else entirely, somewhere between shock and fury. The quarterly projections appeared on the screen, columns of numbers that felt meaningless compared to what I'd tried to show them. "Excellent work on reducing last-mile costs, Jeff," Greg was saying, clapping the shoulder of my colleague who had contributed exactly one idea in the past year. "This is the kind of practical thinking we need." I felt Denise's sympathetic glance, but couldn't meet her eyes. Instead, I meticulously gathered my notes, closed my laptop with deliberate care, and maintained what I hoped was a neutral expression. Inside, a storm was brewing. This wasn't the first time I'd seen Greg dismiss good ideas. 3 months ago, it was Sophia's customer retention program. 6 months before that, Marcus's inventory system overhaul. Both times, those ideas mysteriously resurfaced as Greg's brainchildren weeks later. Both times, Sophia and Marcus said nothing, grateful for the mere acknowledgement that their concepts were worthy, even if they received no credit. But something sharp and resolute crystallized inside me as I sat there, watching Greg parade mediocrity as excellence. I wouldn't be Sophia. I wouldn't be Marcus. As the meeting concluded, Greg didn't even look my way. "Continental's executive team is visiting next Monday," he announced to the room. "I want everyone's A-game. No half-baked ideas." His gaze swept across the room, but pointedly skipped over me. "Great meeting, everyone," he finished with corporate cheerfulness. "Natalie, a word before you go." The room emptied quickly, colleagues escaping like witnesses to a crime. When the door closed, Greg's professional veneer slipped just slightly. "That kind of blue sky thinking might work at tech startups," he said, gathering his papers, still not making eye contact. "But we deal in reality here. Next time, run your ideas by me before wasting everyone's time." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak without saying something I'd regret. But as I turned to leave, one thought burned brighter than my humiliation. What Greg didn't know was that I'd already taken precautions. My apartment felt like a sanctuary that evening as I kicked off my heels and collapsed onto my couch. The humiliation from the morning's meeting still clung to me like a persistent shadow, but beneath it lay something else, a quiet, simmering resolve. I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I'd saved months ago, but never used. "Blackwell Legal Associates. This is Diana speaking." "Hi Diana, it's Natalie Jensen. I need to speak with Martin. It's about that situation we discussed." 20 minutes later, I was video chatting with Martin Blackwell, a former college classmate who'd become one of the city's most respected intellectual property attorneys. His office looked imposing through the screen, law books lining the walls, his Harvard law degree prominently displayed. "So, he actually did it," Martin said, not looking surprised. "Just like you predicted." I nodded, opening my laptop to show him my screen. "Everything's here. All the documentation, the prototype code, the algorithms, every single diagram and flowchart. Time-stamped, backed up to 3 different secure servers, and notarized as you suggested." 6 months ago, after watching Greg take credit for Sophia's customer retention program, I'd made an appointment with Martin. Not because I had an idea to protect back then, but because I sensed I might need to someday. Martin had walked me through the process of documenting and legally protecting my work before presenting it internally. "The provisional patent application we filed last week is rock solid," Martin confirmed, scrolling through documents on his end. "Your AI logistics model is legally protected for the next 12 months while we prepare the full patent. No one, including your employer, can claim it without your consent." I took a deep breath. "And the company doesn't have automatic rights to it. Your employment contract gives them first right of refusal for inventions created on company time, but not ownership," Martin explained. "I made sure of that before we filed. They can license it from you or purchase the rights outright, but they can't simply take it." After ending the call, I walked to my kitchen window overlooking the city lights. The weight of today's humiliation still pressed against my chest, but it was different now, more like fuel than a burden. My phone buzzed with a text from Denise. "You okay?" Greg was way out of line today. I typed back, "I'm fine, just working on something." Then I added, Actually, do you still have access to the exec calendar? 3 dots appeared then. Yes. Why? When's the Continental meeting next week? Monday, 2 p.m., executive boardroom. Greg's doing a big presentation on innovation initiatives. Why? I smiled to myself. Just curious. Thanks. The next morning, I arrived at work earlier than usual. The office was nearly empty at 7:15 a.m., just a few ambitious interns and the cleaning staff. I wanted time alone with my thoughts before facing everyone who had witnessed yesterday's disaster. As I settled at my desk, a calendar notification popped up on my screen. Executive Offsite Strategy Session plus Continental Logistics, Monday, 2 p.m. I pulled up my presentation files, the ones Greg had so unceremoniously dismissed, and began methodically saving backups on my personal encrypted drive. Each diagram, each line of code, each projected outcome, all documented with timestamps and digital signatures. Throughout the week, I maintained a facade of normalcy. I contributed to meetings, completed my regular assignments, and even shared pleasantries with Greg when necessary. No one would have guessed I was meticulously documenting every interaction, every email, every instance where my work was discussed. On Thursday, I noticed Greg's office door was closed, blinds drawn. Through the glass partition, I could see the silhouette of someone hunched over a laptop. He emerged only briefly, barking at his assistant to hold all calls and cancel his lunch meeting. Denise passed by my desk around noon. "What's with the hermit act?" she whispered, nodding toward Greg's office. I shrugged. "Big presentation Monday, I guess." "Yeah, but he's being weird about it. More secretive than usual." She leaned closer. "Janet said he's been asking IT for access to all department files from the past 3 months, including your folders." My pulse quickened, but I kept my expression neutral. Good thing everything important is backed up elsewhere. Denise raised an eyebrow, but didn't press further. That night, I received an unexpected email from our IT director, copied to the entire department. Notice: system maintenance scheduled for this weekend. All network drives will be temporarily inaccessible from Friday 8 p.m. until Sunday 6 a.m. Please save any essential work locally before Friday EOD. A convenient time for someone to borrow ideas with no digital footprints. By Friday afternoon, the office was abuzz with weekend plans. I packed up early, stopping by Greg's still-closed office on my way out. His assistant, Janet, looked frazzled. "He's been like this all week," she whispered. "I've never seen him so focused on a presentation before." I nodded sympathetically. "Continental's a big potential client." "It's more than that," Janet said, glancing over her shoulder. "He said this presentation could mean a VP position. He's calling it revolutionary." "Revolutionary," I repeated, tasting the irony. "Sounds impressive." As I walked to the elevator, my phone buzzed with an email from Martin. "Patent application officially filed and timestamped. All documentation secured with blockchain verification. Ready when you are." In the elevator mirror, I caught my reflection, calm, composed, almost serene. No one would guess that beneath that placid exterior lay a woman preparing for war. What Greg didn't know was that I wasn't just another stepping stone on his path to promotion. I was the landmine. Monday arrived with an air of anticipation that seemed to electrify the entire office. Continental Logistics wasn't just any potential client. They were industry giants, the kind of partnership that transformed mid-sized companies like ours into major players. Everyone felt the stakes. Everyone except me. I wore my best suit that morning, charcoal gray with subtle pinstripes, paired with the pearl earrings my grandmother had given me when I graduated with my master's degree. "For when you need to remember your worth," she'd said. Today, I needed that reminder more than ever. The morning crawled by with agonizing slowness. My colleagues buzzed around preparing last-minute touches for the Continental presentation, while I focused on routine tasks with preternatural calm. Several times, I caught Denise watching me curiously. "Aren't you nervous about the big meeting?" she finally asked around noon. "Everyone's going to be there. CEO, CTO, all the department heads." I took a sip of water. Why would I be nervous? It's Greg's presentation. She studied my face. You're up to something. I'm just doing my job, Denise, I replied, allowing myself a small smile, and making sure credit goes where credit is due. At 1:45 p.m., we filed into the executive boardroom, a sleek space on the top floor with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Continental's representatives had already arrived, 3 impeccably dressed executives whose collective net worth probably exceeded our company's annual revenue. Our CEO, Victoria Shepard, was engaged in animated conversation with Continental's CEO when I entered. Our CTO, Rajiv Mehta, stood nearby, nodding periodically while typing something on his tablet. I'd always respected Rajiv for his technical expertise and fairness, a rare combination in corporate leadership. I chose a seat strategically positioned at the middle of the table, not so prominent as to draw attention, but with a clear view of both Greg and the Continental executives. As others filed in, I opened my notebook to a blank page and uncapped my pen with steady hands. Greg arrived last, clutching a leather portfolio and looking uncharacteristically nervous. His confident swagger had been replaced by an anxious energy as he connected his laptop to the presentation system. When he glanced up and caught my eye, I smiled pleasantly. His momentary confusion was worth every second of last week's humiliation. Thank you all for being here, Victoria began once everyone was seated. As you know, we've been discussing potential synergies between Meridian and Continental for some time. Today, Greg Harmon, our head of operations, will present a revolutionary logistics framework that we believe could transform both our companies' supply chain management systems. Greg stood, smoothing his tie. Thank you, Victoria. He cleared his throat. What I'm about to present represents months of intensive research and development work from my team. The lights dimmed slightly as the first slide appeared on the screen. My slide. My design. The exact same minimalist diagram of the AI-driven logistics model I'd presented the week before. The future of logistics, Greg announced with practice conviction, lies not in reacting to supply chain disruptions, but in predicting them before they occur. Word for word. My words. As he advanced through the presentation, a surreal sense of déjà vu washed over me. It wasn't just similar to my presentation, it was identical, slide for slide, down to the color scheme I'd chosen. The only difference was the presenter. By leveraging machine learning algorithms to analyze historical patterns, Greg continued, gesturing confidently, we can anticipate shipping delays with 94% accuracy. I glanced around the room. The Continental executives were leaning forward, clearly intrigued. Our CEO was nodding approvingly. No one seemed to notice that Greg's confident explanations sometimes faltered when technical questions arose, questions he couldn't truly answer because they weren't his ideas to defend. We call it predictive pathways, Greg said, revealing the tagline slide. Seeing tomorrow's logistics today. My exact words. The same phrase I'd scribbled in my notebook a week earlier. The room erupted in appreciative murmurs. Continental's CTO was already asking about implementation timelines. Under the table, my knuckles turned white as I gripped my pen. My face remained a neutral mask, even as fury and vindication battled within me. I'd expected this, prepared for it, but witnessing the brazen theft in real time still hit like a physical blow. We've been brainstorming this in my office for months. Greg lied smoothly when asked about the development process. It's been a passion project. That's when Continental's CEO asked the question that changed everything. This is impressive work. Is the framework proprietary? Patent protected? A flicker of uncertainty crossed Greg's face before he recovered. We're in the process of securing those protections. Excellent, Continental's CEO replied. Exclusivity would be a key factor in our partnership decisions. As the meeting concluded with handshakes and promises of follow-up discussions, I remained seated, making notes as the room gradually emptied. Greg was surrounded by admirers, basking in praise for my creation. Our CTO, Rajiv, was the last to leave, pausing briefly by my chair. Interesting presentation, he said quietly, his expression unreadable. Very, I agreed, meeting his gaze steadily. Something in my tone made him tilt his head slightly. My office tomorrow morning? 9 o'clock. I nodded once, and he left. As I gathered my things, Greg approached, riding high on his stolen success. "Natalie," he said with magnanimous false cheer, "I hope you were taking notes. That's how you present to executives." I smiled, closing my notebook where I'd written just one sentence. "The trap is set." Oh, I had definitely learned something today, Greg. That night, sleep eluded me. I sat cross-legged on my bed, laptop balanced on my knees, meticulously assembling the evidence. The provisional patent documentation, screenshots of my original presentation files with their creation dates, the email trail showing I'd researched this concept for months, a side-by-side comparison of my slides and Greg's identical presentation. I saved everything to a folder labeled Truth and attached it to 3 separate emails. The first went to compliance@meridianlogistics.com with a subject line, Intellectual Property Violation, Confidential. The second to legal@meridianlogistics.com, Urgent, Patent Infringement Matter. The third directly to Rajiv Mehta, our CTO, Re, Tomorrow's meeting, prior review requested. My finger hovered over the send button for several seconds before I finally pressed it. In the quiet darkness of my apartment, the soft whoosh of those emails departing my outbox sounded impossibly loud. There would be no turning back now. I closed my laptop and walked to the window, looking out at the city lights. Tomorrow would change everything for better or worse. The thought should have terrified me, but instead, a strange calm settled over me. I'd spent my career playing by the rules, working twice as hard for half the recognition. Maybe it was time to play a different game. I arrived at the office early the next morning, before most of my colleagues. The building had a different energy at 7:30 a.m., quieter, more purposeful. As I passed through the lobby, the security guard nodded at me with unusual deference. "Morning, Ms. Jensen," he said. "Mr. Mehta asked me to let him know when you arrived." I thanked him, my pulse quickening. So Rajiv had already seen my email. The elevator doors opened on our floor to reveal an unexpected scene. 2 people I recognized from legal were standing outside Greg's office. The door was open, but the room was empty. Down the hall, I could see lights on in the executive conference room. My phone buzzed with a text from Rajiv. "My office now, please." When I reached the CTO's corner office, I was surprised to find not just Rajiv, but also Victoria Shepard, our CEO, and Eleanor Winters, the head of HR. Their expressions were carefully neutral as Rajiv gestured for me to close the door and take a seat. "Natalie," Victoria began, her voice measured, "we've reviewed the materials you sent last night. Before we discuss them, I want to hear directly from you what happened." I took a deep breath and told them everything from my original development of the AI logistics model to Greg's public dismissal of it, and finally, his verbatim presentation to Continental. I kept my tone professional, focusing on facts rather than emotions. When I finished, the room was silent for several seconds. "The patent application is legitimate?" Eleanor asked, examining a printout on the table. "Yes," I confirmed. "Filed and time-stamped last week, before I ever presented the concept internally." Rajiv leaned forward. "The technical aspects of your model, they're sound? You can implement what was promised to Continental." "Absolutely," I said without hesitation. "I've been running simulations for months. The 94% prediction accuracy is real, and I can prove it." Victoria and Rajiv exchanged glances. "We have a situation," Victoria said finally. Continental was extremely impressed with the presentation. They're ready to sign a partnership agreement worth potentially 8 figures annually, contingent on the exclusive rights to this technology. My heart raced. This was bigger than I'd realized. "But," Victoria continued, "they want to meet the architect of the system. Greg claimed that was him, but your evidence suggests otherwise." "It's not just suggestive," Rajiv interrupted. I checked the server logs. Natalie's files were accessed multiple times over the weekend from Greg's credentials, despite the supposed system maintenance. And, he added, sliding a paper across the table, our IT security flagged this file transferred to Greg's personal email on Sunday night. It's Natalie's original code. Victoria's expression hardened. Eleanor, please have security escort Greg to the small conference room. Tell him nothing. As Eleanor left, Victoria turned to me. Natalie, what do you want from this situation? The question caught me off guard. I'd been so focused on exposing Greg that I hadn't fully considered the aftermath. Recognition for my work, I said after a moment, and the opportunity to lead its implementation. Victoria nodded. And the patent, it's mine, I said firmly. But I'm open to licensing terms that benefit both myself and Meridian. A hint of respect flickered in Victoria's eyes. Fair enough. Rajiv, call Continental. Tell them we're sending the real architect of predictive pathways to meet them this afternoon. She stood, smoothing her skirt. Natalie, take the morning to prepare. This is now your project. As I left Rajiv's office, I caught a glimpse of Greg being escorted into the small conference room. His face was ashen, his usual confidence evaporated. Our eyes met briefly through the glass partition. I didn't smile. I didn't need to. Back at my desk, an email arrived from Eleanor in HR. Please join the executive team for the all-hands meeting tomorrow at 10 a.m. Victoria would like you seated at the front. Appropriate business attire requested. Denise appeared at my cubicle, eyes wide. What the hell is happening? Greg just got marched into a meeting with security. And why are legal people crawling all over his office? I closed my laptop and stood, gathering my notes. Justice, I said simply. And I have a meeting with Continental to prepare for. The Continental meeting had gone better than I could have imagined. Their executives were initially confused by my presence instead of Greg's, but that confusion quickly turned to admiration as I answered their technical questions with confidence and precision, questions that Greg would have stumbled over. By the end of our 2-hour session, Continental's CEO was calling me a visionary, and their legal team was already drafting partnership terms. I returned to Meridian feeling weightless, as if the burden I'd carried for years had finally lifted. When I walked through the office, conversations hushed momentarily before resuming with increased vigor. Word was spreading. Something big was happening. That evening, as most employees filed out, I remained at my desk, finalizing the presentation for tomorrow's all-hands meeting. Victoria had asked me to prepare a 10-minute overview of predictive pathways for the entire company. Make it understandable to everyone, she'd instructed. This is as much about our company culture as it is about technology. Around 7 p.m., as I was gathering my things to leave, my desk phone rang. The caller ID showed Conference Room 3B. Hello. I answered cautiously. Natalie. Greg's voice sounded hollow, stripped of its usual arrogance. We need to talk. My pulse quickened. I don't think that's a good idea, Greg. 5 minutes, he insisted. That's all I'm asking. Face to face. I considered hanging up, but curiosity got the better of me. 5 minutes, I agreed. Conference room 3B was tucked away in a quiet corner of the building. When I entered, Greg was alone, sitting at the table with his head in his hands. He looked up as the door closed behind me, and I was struck by how different he appeared, disheveled, eyes bloodshot, tie loosened. They're firing me, he said without preamble. I remained standing, arms crossed. Did you expect anything else? It wasn't supposed to go this far. He ran a hand through his hair. It was just an idea, Natalie. Ideas get shared all the time in companies. Shared, I repeated. Not stolen and presented as your own after publicly humiliating the actual creator. He had the decency to look away. I didn't think your prototype was real. I thought you were just theorizing. You didn't bother to ask, I countered. You didn't bother to check. You saw an opportunity to climb another rung on the ladder, and you took it just like you did with Sophia's retention program and Marcus's inventory system. His head snapped up. You know about those? Everyone knows, Greg. We just didn't have proof like I do. He stood suddenly, desperation etched across his face. Look, we can still fix this. Tell them it was a collaborative effort. We both get credit. I keep my job, you get a promotion, everyone wins. For a moment, I stared at him in disbelief. Even now, backed into a corner, He was still trying to manipulate the situation. That opportunity expired the moment you rolled your eyes at me in that meeting, I said quietly. You didn't just steal my idea, Greg. You tried to crush my confidence, make me doubt my worth. That's unforgivable. They'll blacklist me, he whispered. 15 years in this industry gone. I'll never get another job at this level. Actions have consequences, I replied, turning toward the door. Maybe you should have thought about that before taking credit for other people's work. You bitch, he hissed, his mask slipping entirely. You think you're so clever with your patents and your evidence? You've made an enemy today. I paused at the door, looking back at him. No, Greg. I've made a statement, and you're not nearly as important as you think you are. I slept fitfully that night, Greg's threat echoing in my mind despite my outward confidence. By morning, however, determination had replaced any lingering anxiety. Today would be the culmination of everything, the public reckoning. The company auditorium was packed by 9:50 a.m. I sat in the front row beside Rajiv, my presentation ready on my tablet. On my other side, Martin Blackwell, my attorney, had been invited at Victoria's request. Across the aisle, I spotted Greg, looking remarkably composed given the circumstances. He caught my eye and gave a tight smile that sent a chill down my spine. At precisely 10 a.m., Victoria took the stage. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this special announcement. She proceeded to recap yesterday's events in broad strokes, the successful meeting with Continental, the forthcoming partnership, and the innovative technology at its core. She never mentioned Greg or the theft directly, maintaining professional courtesy even in this moment. This partnership represents a new chapter for Meridian Logistics, she continued. One built on innovation, integrity, and proper recognition of talent. She glanced my way. And speaking of talent, I'd like to welcome our CTO, Rajiv Mehta, to the stage. Rajiv stood, straightening his jacket as he approached the podium. His expression was solemn as he adjusted the microphone. Yesterday, he began, Continental Logistics agreed to a partnership worth over $12 million annually, contingent on exclusive access to a patented logistics framework designed by one of our own. The room buzzed with excitement. In the back, I could see the marketing team practically salivating at the PR opportunity. This framework, Rajiv continued, represents the kind of forward-thinking innovation that defines our company at its best. It's my pleasure to announce that Meridian has acquired licensing rights to this technology from its creator and patent holder. He paused, his eyes finding me in the front row. Our new director of innovation, Natalie Jensen. The auditorium erupted in applause. Colleagues who had barely acknowledged my existence were suddenly on their feet. Through the noise and movement, I saw Greg's face transform. First confusion, then realization, and finally, a ghostly pallor as he understood the full extent of his defeat. Someone nudged me forward. In a daze, I walked to the stage, accepting Rajiv's handshake and Victoria's warm embrace. Congratulations, she whispered in my ear. You earned this. Every bit of it. As I turned to face my colleagues, I caught sight of Greg slipping quietly toward the exit. No dramatic confrontation. No last words. Just a silent, hollow departure as security waited by the door to escort him from the building. He passed without looking at me, but I didn't need his acknowledgement. The truth had spoken for itself. 6 months can change everything. My new office on the executive floor had windows that stretched from floor to ceiling, overlooking the city skyline I once admired from my apartment. A framed copy of my patent hung on the wall opposite my desk, a daily reminder of the power of preparation and persistence. The transition to director of innovation hadn't been seamless. Some employees, particularly Greg's former allies, viewed me with suspicion or resentment. Others suddenly claimed they'd always believed in me, despite their conspicuous silence during my years of invisibility. I learned quickly which relationships were genuine and which were merely transactional. Denise was among the genuine ones. She'd brought champagne to my apartment the night of Greg's departure. To karma, she'd toasted, clinking her glass against mine. And to having the receipts. The Predictive Pathways implementation was proceeding ahead of schedule. Continental had become our biggest client, and 3 other major logistics companies were now in talks for non-exclusive licensing agreements. The revenue projections for the next fiscal year had executives practically giddy. But success brought its own challenges. I found myself working longer hours than ever, determined to prove my promotion wasn't just about catching a thief, but about my capabilities as a leader and innovator. On a rainy Tuesday morning, Victoria called me into her office. She gestured for me to close the door before speaking. "The board is thrilled with Continental's quarterly reports," she said, sliding a folder across her desk. "Their supply chain disruptions are down 41% since implementing your system." I smiled, opening the folder to find performance metrics that exceeded even my optimistic projections. The machine learning component is adapting faster than expected. The more data it processes, the more accurate it becomes. Victoria nodded, studying me with an intensity that made me slightly uncomfortable. "How are you holding up, Natalie?" "Really?" The question caught me off guard. I'd become so accustomed to projecting unwavering confidence that honesty felt almost like vulnerability. "I'm adjusting," I admitted. "The technical aspects of the job feel natural." "That's normal," she assured me. "Leadership isn't just about having the best ideas. It's about navigating personalities and power dynamics." She paused. "Which brings me to something uncomfortable. Have you heard from Greg?" My stomach tightened. "No. Why?" She sighed, opening her laptop. "He's been reaching out to several of our clients, claiming he was forced out after developing predictive pathways. Most ignored him, but he's persistent." "He's still trying to take credit?" I asked incredulously. "Worse," Victoria replied, turning her screen toward me. "He started a LinkedIn campaign claiming you stole the idea from him and manipulated the evidence." On the screen was a long post from Greg, portraying himself as the victim of corporate drama and gender bias. The comment section was filled with sympathetic responses from former colleagues and industry contacts who'd only heard his side. "It's absurd," I said, though my voice wavered slightly. "We have documentation, timestamps, the patent." "This isn't about facts, Natalie," Victoria interrupted gently. "It's about narrative. In our industry, perception can be as damaging as reality. So, what do we do?" Victoria closed her laptop. "Nothing." I stared at her. "Nothing." "The best response to this kind of desperate flailing is continued excellence," she explained. "Greg has been blacklisted by every major logistics company in the region. His reputation is in tatters. These posts are the last gasps of a drowning career." She was right, of course. Engaging with Greg's lies would only legitimize them. Still, the injustice burned. Later that day, I received an email that momentarily took my breath away. The subject line read, "Patent Licensing Query, Innovative Pathways Project." The sender was a global shipping conglomerate, one of the largest in the world. They weren't just interested in licensing my technology. They wanted to build their entire next-generation logistics framework around it. I forwarded the email to Victoria with a single sentence. "I think we found our narrative response." The following week, we announced the global partnership at an industry conference. I stood at the podium before hundreds of logistics professionals, many of whom had worked with Greg at some point in his career. "Innovation doesn't happen in isolation," I said as I concluded my presentation. "It requires an environment where ideas are respected, where credit is given where it's due, and where integrity is valued above individual advancement." The applause was thunderous. As I stepped away from the microphone, I noticed a familiar figure slipping out the back door of the auditorium. Greg had apparently obtained a conference pass, perhaps hoping to network his way into a new position. Now he was leaving, shoulders hunched, as my success echoed in his ears. I felt no satisfaction in his continued downfall, only a profound sense of closure. That evening, I received a text from Denise with a news link. A prominent industry publication had named me one of the top 30 under 30 innovators in logistics. The accompanying profile mentioned the patent, the Continental partnership, and the recent global expansion. What it didn't mention was Greg. His name had become irrelevant to my story. In my new corner office, I opened the bottom drawer of my desk and removed a small notebook, the same one I'd clutched during that humiliating meeting 6 months ago. Inside, on the first page, was my handwritten tagline: Predictive Pathways, Seeing Tomorrow's Logistics Today. Below it, I wrote a new line: The best revenge isn't just success. It's making your enemies irrelevant to your story. I closed the notebook, placed it in my bag, and turned off the office lights. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new ideas, new opportunities to innovate. And not once would I need to roll my eyes at anyone